To ask about the origins of the Bengali people is to ask a question of a river. Where does it begin? Does it start as a single drop of glacial melt in the high Himalayas, or is it born where 1,000 smaller streams meet and surrender their names to become something greater? The story of the Bengali people is much the same. It is a story not of a single source, but of a grand and perpetual confluence, a history written in water and silt on a land that is itself a gift of the rivers. This land, the Bengal Delta, is the largest on earth, a sprawling, fertile tapestry woven from the threads of three mighty rivers, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and the Meghna. For millennia, these rivers have carried the Himalayas down to the sea, depositing over 1 billion tons of life-giving silt each year in what geologists call a creative process of land-making. They are the region's nurturing mothers, shaping not just the soil but the soul of the place, their ever-flowing waters and fertile sediments sketching the values, beliefs, art, and folklore of the people who call this delta home. This is not a static landscape. It is a place of constant fluid change. Rivers shift their course, new islands, chars, rise from the water, and monsoon floods annually redraw the map. This inherent dynamism of the land has always been an active force in its history, demanding a unique resilience and adaptability from its inhabitants. The people of Bengal learned to live with a nature that was both a giver of immense bounty and a bringer of absolute destruction. This duality is etched into their culture, sung in folk songs that praise Ganga Amar Ma, Mother Ganges, and also lament the Sarbonasaha Padma Nodi, the all-destroying Padma River. Therefore, the real origin of the Bengali people cannot be found in a single tribe, a single migration, or a single moment in time. They are, like their homeland, a product of countless streams flowing together. Their story begins tens of thousands of years ago, with the first hunters who walked this land. It flows through the ancient farmers who first planted rice in its fertile mud, the merchants who sailed its rivers to trade with Rome, the mystics who sang its first poetry, the emperors who built its great cities, and the rebels who fought for its language. To trace their origins is to follow the course of this great river of humanity, to see how each new tributary added its color, its current, its spirit to the magnificent, ever-growing stream that is the Bengali people. Our journey begins long before the delta had fully taken its present shape, in a time when much of the low-lying basin was still beneath the water. The first human whispers are not found in the fertile plains, but in the highlands and forested foothills that cradle them. In places like the Ajodhya Hills of West Bengal, archaeologists have unearthed stone tools that speak of human presence stretching back an astonishing 42,000 years. These were the people of the Old Stone Age, hunter-gatherers who moved through landscapes of dense forest and moderate rainfall, their lives tied to the rhythms of the wild. At sites like Hatpara, on the banks of the Bhagirathi River, evidence of settlements from 15,000 to 20,000 years ago has been found, including small stone weapons and the coppery-colored bones of burnt fish, a simple yet profound testament to a meal eaten by a riverbank tens of thousands of years ago. As the millennia passed, the climate warmed, and the delta continued its slow, patient birth. A new chapter began, the Copper Age, around 4,000 years ago. This was a time of profound transformation. In river valleys like the Ajay Damodar, the first settled agricultural communities emerged. At sites like Pandu Raja Dibi, people began to live in systematically aligned housing, crafting distinctive blackie and red pottery and learning the magic of metalworking, producing copper objects like ornaments and tools. A fascinating window into their world has been opened by the discovery of pit dwellings, simple subterranean homes dug into the earth, offering a humble but intimate glimpse into the lives of Bengal's first settled families. These were the pioneers, the first to truly call this new land home, their lives a bridge between the ancient world of the hunter and the coming age of the farmer. The single most revolutionary moment in the early history of Bengal was the arrival of a single, humble grain, rice, and with it came the people who knew its secrets. Around 1500 BCE, a great wave of migration brought Austroasiatic-speaking peoples into the region. Related through ancestry and language to the Munda and Khasi peoples of eastern India and Southeast Asia, these newcomers were not just settlers, they were agricultural visionaries. They introduced the transformative technology of wet rice agriculture, a practice perfectly suited to the waterlogged floodplains of the delta. This was the gift that would define Bengal's destiny. Rice cultivation turned the delta's greatest challenge, its abundance of water, into its greatest strength. It allowed for a stable and plentiful food supply, enabling settled life to flourish on an unprecedented scale. Villages grew, populations expanded, and the economic foundation for all of Bengal's future cities and empires was laid in these primordial paddy fields. The legacy of these first farmers is not just economic, it is woven into the very fabric of the Bengali language. Even today, words for agriculture, for the plow, for betel leaf and coconut, and for rice itself, dhanya, echo their Austroasiatic origins, a linguistic fossil record of their foundational contribution. The heritage of these first farmers is an ancestral thread still woven into the people of today, an unbroken connection to those who first tamed the delta. The ancient canvas of Bengal was not painted by a single hand. As the Austroasiatic farmers were laying down the green fields of rice, other groups were arriving, adding new colors and textures to the emerging portrait. From the west and south, around 1000 BCE, came Dravidian-speaking peoples. Some scholars believe these migrants were connected to the slow dispersal of people from the declining Indus Valley civilization, bringing with them elements of a more urban culture. Ancient texts refer to a powerful tribe named the Bang or Vanga that settled in the southern delta around this time, and it is from them that the land is thought to have ultimately derived its name. Vanga, then Bangala, and finally Bengal. To the later arriving Indo-Aryans, these established peoples were sometimes viewed as outsiders, yet their contribution was fundamental. Their heritage forms a core component of the modern Bengali makeup, a foundational stream of ancestry from the south. Meanwhile, from the north and east along the Himalayan foothills and the hills of Myanmar, another stream of people began to flow into the region. These were the Tibeto-Burman speaking groups who migrated in successive waves, particularly during the Buddhist period, settling in the northern and eastern fringes of Bengal. They brought with them distinct languages, cultural practices, and a distinct East Asian heritage that is still prominent today in communities like the Chakma, Marma, and Tripura peoples of the Chittagong Hill Tracts and surrounding areas. This early period reveals the essential truth of the Bengali origin story. The original Bengali is not a single root, but a braid of many distinct prehistoric threads. The Austroasiatic farmer, arriving around 1500 BCE, provided the sustenance by introducing wet rice agriculture. The Dravidian builder and trader, arriving around 1000 BCE, provided the name and perhaps the first impulses of urbanism. The Tibeto-Burman Highlander, arriving in waves from the first millennium BCE, provided a constant connection to the lands of the East. Later, from around 1500 BCE onwards, Indo-Aryan peoples would arrive, introducing iron tools, large-scale irrigation, and the languages that would eventually form the basis of modern Bengali. This foundational diversity, this inherent hybridity from the very beginning, is the key to understanding Bengal's later history. It created a culture already accustomed to absorbing and integrating new peoples and new ideas, a true melting pot whose fires were lit thousands of years ago. As the Iron Age dawned around 1000 BCE, bringing with it stronger tools, coinage, and more advanced irrigation, the small agricultural villages of Bengal began to coalesce into something far grander: cities. By the middle of the first millennium BCE, a wave of urbanization swept across northern India, and Bengal was at its heart. Along the great river arteries of the Brahmaputra and the Ganges, magnificent urban centers emerged, not as remote outposts, but as vibrant hubs of culture and global commerce. One of the most spectacular of these is the ancient city of Wari-Bateshwar, discovered in modern-day Narsingdi, Bangladesh. Uncovered first by a curious local school teacher in the 1930s, this 2,500-year-old metropolis has rewritten the first chapter of Bengali urban history. Scientific dating places its origins to at least 450 BCE. Excavations have revealed a sophisticated, well-planned city, fortified with massive brick-built ramparts, paved roads, and a surrounding moat. It was a major inland river port on the banks of the old Brahmaputra, a bustling trade emporium that many scholars believe was the city of Saunagura, mentioned on a 2nd century map by the Roman geographer Ptolemy. The artifacts unearthed from its soil tell a story of incredible global connection. Hordes of silver punch-marked coins speak of a monetized economy, but it is the foreign goods that truly astonish: lustrous pottery from the Gangetic plains, Thousands of beads made of semi-precious stones like carnelian and amethyst, and most remarkably pottery, and even an amphora that traced trade routes to the Roman Empire and the Mediterranean. Wari-Bateshwar was a crossroads of the world, connected to the legendary Silk Road and the maritime lanes that stretched from Southeast Asia to Rome. Further north, on the banks of the sacred Karatoya River, stood another marvel, Mahastangar, the ancient city of Pandranagara. For over 1,500 years, from the 3rd century BCE through the 12th century CE, this was the magnificent capital of the Pundra kingdom. Enclosed by a colossal rectangular fortification of mud and brick ramparts rising high above the plains, the city was a vibrant administrative, religious, and cultural hub. Within its walls lay palaces, assembly halls, and ornate temples, while outside its gates hundreds of mounds mark the remains of suburban dwellings and great Buddhist monasteries. Like Wari-Bateshwar, it was a center of immense wealth and culture, a beacon of civilization in the ancient delta. Long before archaeologists unearthed these lost cities, their power was the stuff of legend in the distant lands of Europe. Ancient Greek and Roman writers from the 1st century BCE to the 2nd century CE spoke of a mighty kingdom in the east called the Gangaridai, the people of the Ganges Delta. In the accounts of historians like Diodorus Siculus and Plutarch, the Gangaridai were a nation of immense military strength, a power so formidable that no foreign enemy had ever conquered them. Their reputation rested on one terrifying weapon of war, a vast force of elephants. The Greeks, who had faced war elephants before, heard tales that the beasts of the Gangaridai were greater in size and strength than any others. The numbers alone were staggering. When Alexander the Great, having conquered the Persian Empire and pushed his armies to the edge of the Indian subcontinent, stood at the banks of the river Hyphasis in 325 BCE, his famously loyal and battle-hardened Macedonian soldiers finally refused to go further. They had heard what lay ahead, the kingdom of the Gangaridai waiting for them with a reported army of 80,000 cavalry, 200,000 infantry, 8,000 chariots, and, most terrifyingly, 6,000 war elephants. Faced with this prospect, the will of the world's greatest conquering army finally broke. Alexander was forced to turn back. This legendary kingdom is often identified with the ancient Vanga kingdom, a powerful maritime empire that was renowned for its strong navy and overseas colonies. The story of Prince Vijaya of Bengal sailing to conquer and found the first kingdom in Sri Lanka is a testament to this naval prowess. The existence of such a powerful military and naval force was not an accident. It was the direct result of the immense wealth generated by controlling the delta's riverine highways and its access to the sea lanes of the Bay of Bengal. The fine cotton and muslin textiles of Vanga, praised in ancient texts, were just one of the many valuable goods that flowed through its ports. The riches from this global trade, passing through cities like Wari-Bateshwar, funded the thousands of war elephants that deterred even Alexander the Great. The early kingdoms of Bengal were not quiet backwaters waiting to be discovered by larger empires. They were regional superpowers in their own right, their strength and prosperity born from the unique geography of the delta they commanded. The story of Bengal is a rhythm of integration and independence, a pendulum swinging between being a jewel in an emperor's crown and a crown in its own right. For 1,000 years, from the 3rd century BCE to the 12th century CE, this rhythm was defined by 4 great dynasties, each leaving an indelible mark on the land and its people. The Mauryans first integrated Bengal into a pan-Indian empire and introduced Buddhism. They were followed by the Guptas, who ushered in a golden age of art and literature, allowing a unique regional style to flourish. Then came Bengal's own indigenous golden age under the Pala Empire, a global center for Buddhist learning that gave birth to the Bengali language itself. Finally, the Sena dynasty arrived from the south, championing orthodox Hinduism and consolidating a new social order, setting the stage for the next great transformation. In the 3rd century BCE, for the first time, the patchwork of kingdoms in Bengal was brought under the umbrella of a single vast pan-Indian power, the Mauryan Empire. The most powerful evidence of this new era comes not from a chronicle of kings, but from a simple, humane message carved on a limestone slab. Discovered at Mahastanga, the great city of Pundranagara, the Mahastan Brahmi inscription is an order from a high-ranking Mauryan official, likely during the reign of the great emperor Ashoka. Written in the Prakrit language, it instructs the local administrator to distribute grain and coins from the state treasury to the people of the area who were suffering from a famine.
It is a remarkable testament to a centralized bureaucratic government concerned with the welfare of its subjects, even in its most distant provinces.
But the Mauryans brought more than just organized governance. They brought a new spiritual path. Emperor Ashoka, after his conversion, became the world's great patron of Buddhism, and his influence deeply seeded the faith in Bengal's fertile soil. He is said to have built stupas across the land, monuments that the Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang would still see standing centuries later. This period marked the beginning of a profound and centuries-long relationship between Bengal and the teachings of the Buddha, a bond that would come to define its greatest indigenous age. If the Mauryan era was about order, the Gupta era, see 4th to 6th centuries CE, was about splendor. Often called the Golden Age of India, this was a time of unparalleled flourishing in art, science, and literature. Bengal was once again integrated as a vital province within a grand empire, its administration efficiently organized into districts and villages. The region's economy boomed. The port of Tamralipta, modern Tamluk on the Bengal coast, became a bustling gateway for maritime trade, sending ships laden with goods to the far shores of Southeast Asia. While the empire's heartland produced great Sanskrit literary masters, Bengal's unique contribution to this golden age was made of humbler stuff, clay. The Gupta period witnessed an explosion of terracotta art across Bengal, a tradition that blended the classical elegance of the imperial style with a vibrant, earthy local spirit. From the ruins of Mahastangar and other sites, thousands of terracotta plaques and figurines have been recovered. They depict everything from the great Hindu gods, like a magnificent 5th-century bust of Vishnu, to scenes from the Ramayana and intimate moments of daily life, women combing their hair, musicians playing instruments, and children with their toys. Initially, the artisans followed the refined styles coming from the great artistic centers of the Gupta heartland. But soon a distinctly Bengali style emerged, full of life and movement, a testament to the skill and creative genius of the local artisans. In these fired clay tablets, we see Bengal not just absorbing a golden age, but weaving its own golden thread into it. After the fall of the Guptas, Bengal descended into a century of chaos and internal conflict, a dark age known as Matsya-Nyaya, the law of the fish, where the big fish eat the small. Out of this anarchy, in the middle of the 8th century, the people of Bengal took their destiny into their own hands. In an extraordinary act, the various independent chieftains came together and elected one of their own, a man named Gopala, to be their king and restore order. With this, the Pala dynasty was born and Bengal entered its own indigenous golden age. For 400 years, the c. 750–1174 CE, the Pala Empire was not just a regional kingdom, but a dominant power in northern India. The Palas were devout Buddhists, and under their patronage, Bengal became the last great global center of Buddhist learning and art. They founded and supported magnificent monastic universities, Mahaviharas like Vikramshila, Odantapuri, and the crown jewel, Somapura Mahavihara in present-day Bangladesh, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. These were the great universities of their day, vast complexes of learning that attracted thousands of monks, scholars, and students from as far away as Tibet, China, and Southeast Asia. Bengali scholars like Atisha traveled from these centers to revive Buddhism in Tibet, making Bengal a major cultural exporter. Even more profoundly, this era gave birth to the Bengali language itself, the first glimmers of a distinct tongue, separate from its Sanskrit and Prakrit ancestors, appear in the Charyapada. These are the earliest surviving examples of Bengali literature, a collection of mystical songs composed by Buddhist masters between the 8th and 12th centuries. Their language is cryptic, a twilight language where everyday images hold deep, esoteric meanings. A line by one poet, for example, speaks of a low-caste girl rowing a boat across a river. But its hidden meaning describes the soul crossing the river of existence to achieve enlightenment. In these ancient, haunting verses, we hear for the first time the voice of Bengal singing its own song. The end of Bengal's Buddhist Golden Age came in the late 12th century with the rise of a new power, the Sena dynasty. The Senas were outsiders, warriors who traced their origins to the Karnataka region of South India and had likely served as officials under the palace before seizing power. With them, they brought a profound cultural and religious shift. The pendulum swung away from Buddhism and back toward a resurgent, orthodox, Brahmanical Hinduism. The Sena kings were staunch patrons of the worship of Vishnu and Shiva,
Under their rule, the great Buddhist monasteries lost their royal support and began to decline, and Buddhism, which had been the light of Bengal for centuries, slowly faded from the land that had been its last great sanctuary. In its place, the Senas promoted a more rigid social order. King Balala Sena is famously credited with establishing or consolidating the system of Kulanism, a strict hierarchical ranking of Brahmin and other upper caste families. This move fundamentally reshaped Bengali Hindu society, entrenching a conservative social structure that would have a long and complex legacy. While the Sena court patronized great Sanskrit poets, their reign marked a turn towards orthodoxy. This reimposition of a rigid social hierarchy and the suppression of the region's long-standing Buddhist traditions created deep social and religious fissures. It left a significant portion of the population, particularly those in the lower castes and the followers of the declining Buddhist faith, feeling marginalized and spiritually adrift. Unintentionally, the Senas were setting the stage for Bengal's next great transformation, creating a vacuum that a new faith, arriving from the West, would soon fill. The arrival of Islam in Bengal was not a single event, but a long, slow tide that would eventually reshape the delta's cultural landscape. It began with the quiet footsteps of Arab traders on the coast centuries earlier, but it surged into a transformative force with the thunder of Turkic cavalry and the gentle songs of Sufi saints. This was not a simple replacement of one culture with another, it was a profound fusion, a great confluence that would give birth to a new, uniquely Bengali Muslim identity. While Arab merchants had been a familiar sight in Bengal's bustling port cities since the 8th century, their presence was largely commercial. The political chapter of Islam in Bengal began dramatically in 1204 CE.
A Turkic general from the Delhi Sultanate, Ikhtiyar al-Din Muhammad Bakhtiyar Khalji, led a small band of horsemen on a lightning raid that captured the Sena capital of Nadia, effectively shattering the Hindu dynasty's power. This conquest opened the floodgates for a new wave of migration into Bengal. From across the Islamic world came Turkic, Afghan, and Persian soldiers seeking fortune, administrators to govern the new territory, scholars and architects to build a new society, and merchants to capitalize on Bengal's legendary wealth. This influx brought not only new peoples, adding Central Asian and Persian threads to the ancestral tapestry of Bengal, but also new languages, new technologies, and a new worldview. For over a century, Bengal was ruled as a province of the distant Delhi Sultanate, a period of adjustment and the initial planting of a new Turco-Persian elite onto Bengali soil. The true flowering of Islamic culture in Bengal began in 1352, when a powerful nobleman named Shamsuddin Ilyas Shah threw off the yoke of Delhi, unified the delta's different regions, and established the independent Bengal Sultanate. In a moment of profound significance, he declared himself Shah-e-Bangalian, the king of the Bengalis. For the first time in history, the entire region was united under a single native political entity with a single name, Bangala. For the next 200 years, the Bengal Sultanate was a period of remarkable independence, prosperity, and cultural synthesis. European and Chinese visitors marveled at its wealth, calling it the richest country to trade with. But the Sultanate's most enduring legacy was its cultural policy. The sultans, though Muslim and of foreign descent, became passionate patrons of the local culture. In a revolutionary step, they elevated the Bengali language to a courtly status, commissioning scholars to translate the great Sanskrit epics, the Mahabharata and Ramayana, into Bengali for the first time. This royal patronage gave Bengali an unprecedented prestige, nurturing a literary renaissance. This was an era of beautiful blending of traditions that was visible everywhere. In architecture, magnificent structures like the Adina Mosque at Pandua fused the grand scale of Persian imperial design with the delicate, intricate terracotta ornamentation that was a hallmark of Bengali craftsmanship. In the court, Hindu nobles and officials served in the highest positions of government, their expertise valued by the Muslim rulers. The most profound fusion, however, was happening at the grassroots, led by a wave of charismatic Sufi missionaries or peers. Saints like Shah Jalal and Khan Jahan Ali traveled through the countryside, not with swords, but with a message of divine love, human equality, and mystical devotion. Their teachings resonated powerfully with a populace that had been marginalized by the rigid caste system of the Senas and left spiritually unmoored by the decline of Buddhism. The Sufis established hospices and community kitchens, creating centers of social and spiritual life.
Their approach was gentle and inclusive, often blending Islamic tenets with local folk beliefs and practices. They did not demand that new converts abandon their old ways entirely, but rather guided them towards a new path. This peaceful, syncretic approach, combined with the social equality offered by Islam, led to one of the largest
and most peaceful mass conversions in history, creating a vast Bengali Muslim population. In the 16th century, Bengal's period of independence came to an end as it was absorbed into the colossal Mughal Empire. It became the empire's wealthiest province, its agricultural and textile wealth famously described as the breadbasket of India. The integration brought another significant infusion of Central Asian heritage and culture as Mughal governors, generals, and administrators arrived with their entourages, often intermarrying with the local elite. The city of Dhaka was elevated to a provincial capital, growing into a magnificent metropolis known as the Venice of the East for its waterways and the City of Mosques for its stunning architecture. Mughal influence permeated the culture of the elite, from cuisine, introducing dishes like biryani, korma, and kebab, to fashion and courtly etiquette. However, the Mughal relationship with Bengal was more complex than that of the sultans. Many in the Mughal ruling class, hailing from the drier climates of North India and Central Asia, viewed the humid riverine landscape of Bengal as a hardship post, a house of turbulence. They often maintained a sense of cultural superiority, distinguishing themselves from the local Bengali population. One of the most significant changes was the reimposition of Persian as the official language of the court and administration. This act, while standard for the Mughal Empire, reversed the Sultanate's policy of patronizing Bengali, temporarily pushing the local language out of the halls of power and creating a cultural distance between the new rulers and the ruled. This period highlighted the unique achievement of the independent Sultanate, which had forged a culture that was both Muslim and deeply, proudly Bengali. The final chapters of the Bengali origin story were forged in fire. The arrival of European powers, the trauma of colonial exploitation, the intellectual ferment of a great awakening, and the violent birth of new nations would test the Bengali spirit to its limits. Through it all, a people who had for millennia been defined by their ability to absorb and synthesize would discover the one non-negotiable core of their identity, their mother tongue. Drawn by the fabled wealth of Bengal, European traders had been a presence on its shores for centuries. The Portuguese arrived first, followed by the Dutch, the French, and finally the English. Initially, they were just one more group of foreigners seeking to profit from Bengal's riches. But the British East India Company had ambitions that went far beyond trade. Taking advantage of the decaying Mughal Empire, they played a political game of intrigue and force that culminated in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. With this victory, a trading company became a ruling power, and Bengal's fate was sealed. The impact of early British rule was catastrophic. Unlike previous rulers who had become part of the land, the company's goal was the systematic and efficient extraction of wealth for the benefit of a distant island nation. Their policies were designed to transform Bengal's economy into a colonial resource engine. The region's world-renowned textile industry, which had produced exquisite muslins and silks for centuries, was systematically dismantled by prohibitive tariffs and protectionist policies designed to favor British mills. Millions of weavers were thrown out of work, forced into an already crowded agricultural sector. At the same time, the British imposed a rigid and unforgiving new system of land revenue collection. When a severe drought struck in 1769, these brutally high taxes were collected without mercy. The result was the Great Famine of 1770. It was a man-made disaster of unimaginable scale. An estimated 10 million people, a full third of Bengal's population, perished from starvation and disease, a tragedy that left a permanent scar on the collective memory of the people. Out of the ashes of this economic and social devastation, an extraordinary intellectual and cultural movement was born. The Bengal Renaissance, which swept through the 19th and early 20th centuries, was a profound awakening, a response to the painful collision of a proud, ancient civilization with the aggressive modernity of the West. Centered in the new colonial capital of Calcutta, a generation of Bengali thinkers, writers, and reformers grappled with the urgent questions of their time. How could they reform their own society while resisting the cultural arrogance of their colonizers? How could they embrace the new learning of the West without losing their own soul? Led by towering figures like the great social and religious reformer Raja Ramohan Roy, the movement challenged deeply entrenched social evils like the immolation of widows and the rigidities of the caste system, advocating for women's rights, modern education, and a rational, humanistic interpretation of religion. It was an era of explosive creativity. The Bengali language, which had been nurtured by the sultans, was now modernized and transformed into a powerful vehicle for novels, plays, and poetry by literary giants like Michael Madhusudan Dutt and Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. The movement reached its zenith in the luminous figure of Rabindranath Tagore, a poet, novelist, composer, and philosopher whose genius was so universal that in 1913 he became the first non-European to be awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. The Renaissance also produced pioneering scientists of global stature, such as Jagadish Chandra Bose and Satyendra Nath Bose, who proved that the Bengali mind could lead the world not just in art, but in science. This was more than just an artistic flowering, it was the forging of a modern Bengali identity, one that was self-aware, critical, and deeply rooted in its own language and culture. The new consciousness born of the Renaissance soon flowed into the channels of political nationalism. Bengalis were at the forefront of the movement for India's independence. But the British, in a final, fateful act of colonial policy, applied their strategy of divide and rule to the very heart of the movement. In 1905, they partitioned Bengal along religious lines, a move that, though later reversed, planted the seeds of a division that would prove permanent. In 1947, when the British finally left, Bengal was torn in two. The western Hindu-majority part became the state of West Bengal in India. The eastern Muslim-majority part became East Pakistan, the physically detached and culturally distinct wing of the new nation of Pakistan. The Bengalis of East Pakistan soon found themselves under a new form of colonial rule, dominated politically, economically, and culturally by a West Pakistani elite who viewed their language and culture with disdain. The breaking point came when the Pakistani state attempted to impose Urdu as the sole national language, effectively erasing the linguistic identity of the majority of its population. The response was immediate and passionate. On February 21, 1952, students and activists in Dhaka protesting for the right to their mother tongue were shot and killed by police. The martyrs of the Bengali language movement became symbols of a new kind of struggle. After centuries of defining themselves through religion, region, and empire, the Bengali people had found the bedrock of their identity, their language. This cultural nationalism, born in the blood of the language martyrs, could not be suppressed. It fueled a movement for autonomy that, after years of political struggle and a brutal crackdown by the Pakistani army, erupted into the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971. After a heroic and bloody 9-month struggle, a new nation was born. Bangladesh became the first and only country in the world created on the basis of linguistic and cultural identity. It was the ultimate, triumphant assertion of a unique heritage, the culmination of a journey that had begun thousands of years before in the silt of the Bengal Delta. The story of the Bengali people is a river. Its headwaters lie in the misty highlands of a 40,000-year-old past, where the first hunter-gatherers left their stone tools by ancient streams. Its course was first channeled by the Austroasiatic farmers, who turned the floodplains into a sea of rice, and by the Dravidian-speaking Vanga, who gave the river its name. As it flowed through time, it was joined by countless tributaries. The Mauryans brought the gentle current of Buddhism. The Guptas poured in a golden stream of classical art, which the people of the Delta transformed into their own unique terracotta style. In the Pala era, the river swelled into a mighty torrent, a Bengali empire that carried its own culture and learning across Asia, and in whose waters the first words of the Bengali language were formed. The Senas arrived from the south, adding the strong, orthodox currents of Brahmanical Hinduism. Then came the great confluence, when the river of Bengal met the powerful tide of Islam brought by Turkic conquerors and Persian Sufis. This was not a clash but a merging, creating a deep, rich, syncretic culture that flourished under the independent sultans, who honored the river by giving its language the patronage of a court. The Mughals and the Europeans followed, each adding their own powerful currents, sometimes enriching, often tragically destructive. Through it all, the river flowed on. It weathered the storms of famine and partition, it carved new channels through the hard rock of colonial oppression and cultural suppression. It found its voice in the poets of the Renaissance and its strength in the martyrs who died for its name. The real origin of the Bengali people, then, is not a single point on a map. It is the river itself. It is the unbroken 40,000-year-old thread of resilience, adaptation, and synthesis. It is the remarkable capacity to absorb new streams of people, ideas, and faiths, while never losing the essential character of the current. The story of Bengal is written in its very people, a complex tapestry of migrations from South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and beyond. But more than that, it is written in the land itself, a land of water, silt, and soul, constantly changing, constantly renewing, forever flowing towards the sea.